I can remember when he was gone, hearing the Ayore in the middle of the night running up the hill. And I thought, oh no, they're going to kill us now. And Howard's gone. And I was so scared. My heart was pumping out of my chest.
Feeding on the husks around me till my strength was almost gone. Longed my soul for something better, only still to hunger on.
You're listening to Singing Their Song.
Hi, I'm Maxine.
And I'm Rebecca. We're glad you joined us. Kind of where we left off recording last time is you were about to have your second baby.
Yes.
So this, and then how old? So that would have been Nancy.
Yes, Howie was 1 year old at June 13th.
Okay.
And Nancy was born June 29th.
Wow. Okay.
That's how close they were.
You're very close. And so Mike wasn't that soon after. He was, two years later?
We were able to go by a June without having another baby.
Okay.
But we didn't hit another June. He was born in April before the next June.
Okay. And
so
so
it was like I had triplets.
Okay. And so you learned somewhere in between there that you were going to go live with the tribe or near the tribe.
Yes, well, that was always in the plan eventually. And so we were still in San Jose. And I think we ended up last time with Grandpa got off the plane I was going to get on.
Yeah.
And I don't know if we got to Cochabamba then or not.
No, we did not.
Okay. Well, about a week later, he had been sick really for another whole week. And then he said, I think I can make it at least. So we went up to the airport again, got on the plane. And when we got to Cochabamba, he went to a doctor and he had typhoid fever. And that's why he was so sick. And then it was probably about 2 weeks later that Nancy came along.
Wow.
He was just barely getting on his feet to take care of Howie while I was, but fortunately we did have a mission home at that time. And so when you know how the mission home used to be, I'm sure I've made that clear, how that they had a dining room, so we had a place to eat, and we didn't have fancy living quarters, we just had one room. But when she was born, we got to the hospital, and Larry Johnson, who was the buyer at the time, took us over there in his car. And the doctor told Howard, you can go home because she's not going to have this baby till in the morning. And I thought to myself, oh, yes, I am. I'm not going to go through this. And I did a very, very, very foolish thing. And I started pushing.
Oh.
And the nurse crawled out and said, she's going to have the baby. And when Nancy was born, I wanted to make sure Howard knew. And in those days, the fathers couldn't come in and be with you. So with all my might, I called, it's a girl. So we had a son and a daughter that quick in our marriage. And then we went back to San Jose from there. And we lived in San Jose for maybe oh, I don't know, probably a few months. But Howard continued his journeys and doing all of the things he did to run supplies for Toby Tay and all. And I remember I lost my milk, and so I gave her a bottle. Well, there was a chicheria, which means a beer joint, nearby. And the lady that ran that beer joint was so concerned when the whole town, little place. And so everybody knew I wasn't nursing Nancy. So she would come out on the sidewalk if I walked by and said, come in, I'll give you beer.
Oh.
Beer will make beer will make all your milk come back. I didn't. I didn't go in.
For what it's worth, when I had Dylan and I had the same kind of issue where I couldn't nurse, they recommended that I drink a beer.
Yeah.
So there's something to it.
They made theirs, it was called chicha.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they called their beer. But there was just chicha could be just not at all alcoholic, and then it was degrees of alcohol as it aged. And we used to like the plain non-alcoholic, and they made it with peanuts flavoring, and it was really good.
That sounds interesting.
But then when we finally got the word that we were to move into Toby Tay, that now we could go. And by this time, your grandpa loved animals. Mm-hmm. By this time, he got us, we moved in with another missionary couple that had been missionaries up in the northern part of Bolivia. Mm-hmm. And they had contacted a group of tribal people up there, and they had a tragedy. One of the missionaries was killed, and then the tribal people left, and they never came back.
What killed him?
They found him killed by the river. He had been down by the river, and no one knows why they killed him. The other missionaries found him there, dead by the river, and the tribal people were all gone.
Oh, okay.
So they had been through that trial, and they were being relocated, and that was Jim and Helen, and so we were moving out. They came to San Jose, and we moved out with them. They had 2 little children, just about the same ages as our 2 little children. So we had kerosene run refrigerator. So Howard set up the kerosene run refrigerator in the boxcar. So we could put milk in for our babies. So we had all these bottles of milk in there so we could feed our babies on the trip. And Howard had a baby deer, a parrot, a mama cat with her newborn babies, and a little dog.
You had a little farm.
The story of my life living with your grandpa.
I knew I got it from somewhere.
Him and his animals. But when we got, first of all, they took the boxcar we had solicited off. When it reached El Porton, is the station where we would get off the train, and they took the boxcar off. So with all of our menagerie and so then they had a truck there at the time, and we were all in the truck. And all of our stuff in the back of it, animals and people. And when we got to Toby Tay, I handed Nancy down. She was 10 months old. and I handed her down to one of the missionary ladies that was already there, Jane Small. And Jane Small just handed Nancy over to this old Ayore lady. And I kind of gasped. And that Ayore lady began to hunt for teeth in Nancy's mouth with her finger. And she was going all through her mouth with her finger. Everything I'd ever put in her mouth had been boiled first.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, from here on out, Lord, you're going to have to protect my children. I can't. And that was my first reaction. Oh, for my kids. How am I going to do with this?
Yeah, I would be feeling the same way probably.
And everything was so different. You know, San Jose was in comparison, it was like a metropolis compared to what we were moving into. All the missionaries' houses were very similar to what they were building for the IRA, because the IRA did not have houses. And so they had a few houses they had built for the IRA already down a hill, not like miles away. It was down a hill. And the missionaries had their houses up the hill. And there were two other sets of missionaries there. There were 3 single girls and a man and his wife and little children. So we were beefing up the personnel for the IRA work. And there had been another missionary couple there that had left, so their little home was vacant. So they said, we have a storage shed and we have a little one-room house. So you two, Jim and Helen and Howard and Maxine, you can choose which one you want to go into. And so we decided to draw straws, and we got the house, which wasn't much of a house, and they got the storage shed. And that's what we moved into. Wow. And they were mudded houses with mudded floors and woven palm roofs. Wow. That was our first house.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That was your first house together with a mud floor.
All we had was beds, and that's it. That's what was in our house, beds. And then there was kind of like a walkway, like a long couch, maybe, like I'm sitting on, about that wide a walkway. And then there was another little house, and it was the kitchen. So we had a bedroom and a kitchen, and the kitchen had nothing.
I was going to ask, what was it? Okay, so what was there any way to cook and things like? I mean, you had your little kerosene refrigerator.
We had our little kerosene refrigerator, but we didn't have any type of stove. But there was a stove that someone had built, and it was a little wood. It was just kind of like a mudded platform, and then you built your fire, and then there was a grate on top of it. So that was what we cooked on, and eventually Howard wasn't much of a carpenter, but he kind of worked on getting us what we needed. Or he would go to maybe one of the ranches and buy things for us. Yeah. Wow. And that was our start.
That's quite the start.
Yeah.
Gosh, thinking about what most couples would dream of their first home, and I don't know that that's in mind for a lot of couples to think, well, we're going to move into this mud floored, little hut. So you lived really close, and then the tribe was just below down the hill.
Down the hill, and then down a little ways from where the Ayore camp was the little tiny little river that flowed behind. But it had a good water source, headwaters, so we never lacked water. It was not big, but it did for washing clothes. It did for we'd get our water uphill from where we did bathing, and we had water. And I
Now,
remember one of the first phrases that I learned was "Unyeke doyo dia," and that means somebody bring water. And you'd wait to see maybe if nobody would come or somebody would come, and up would come the hill one of the IRA men, and you'd give him your 2 buckets, and he'd bring you back water. And then we bartered. Then in those days, they didn't know a thing about money at all. And I would give them bread or bananas, or I would give them food. And that's how we got our water.
wow.
Yeah.
And did you have to? Did you boil it? Is that like how before you drank it?
No, we didn't boil it because the the missionaries that were already there said as long as they get it from this certain part, there's no bathing or anything.
Okay.
So we didn't bathe. We didn't boil it, and I would call that Unyeke doyo dia many times a day because at the beginning we just had 2 buckets. And then Howard figured out other ways where we could store it, and then he would have them fill a barrel.
Okay.
Like that. But yeah, living was really a challenge for me. I had no idea I would be living like that. One night we were in our beds, and our dog was in there with us in our bedroom, and all of a sudden it got to running around the hole, just running wild around the floor, and we couldn't stop him. So Howard got out of bed, and he said, "Oh, stay in bed, Maxine, stay in bed." And he was slapping his legs, and the army ants had come through.
Oh no.
And he said, "Stay in bed and keep the covers up." And he was running around just like the dog.
No.
And he opened up the door and let the dog out. And the next morning, we talked to one of the man missionary that was there, and he says, "Oh, the army ants are they're our friends." And he said, "You just look. There'll be all kinds of things they have killed in the night." And sure enough, there were cockroach wings, there was centipede, there was all manner of stuff that they had killed during the night.
Wow.
And Howard said, "Well, what about us?" And he said, "Well, you get a can and fill it with kerosene and put all of the legs of your beds in the kerosene can, and they won't get into your beds." So that's what we did.
A little bit of a fire hazard, but
Yeah, but it was insect control too.
Wow.
So
Oh man. And the kids were in there with you.
yes, yeah, they were still in cribs.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
That poor
Yeah.
pup was going,
Yeah. If it hadn't been for him, they probably would have gotten in our beds.
Probably. Oh man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm itchy just thinking about it. Goodness. And didn't Grandpa at one point? I thought there was a story about Grandpa getting something in his boot, or something like a bigger animal.
Well, we had an armadillo.
An armadillo. Yeah, there you go.
It was like a regular pet. Wherever we were, there it was. And when we'd go to bed at night, if we closed the door, it would scratch at the door and want to come in. So Howard would throw his boot out.
That's what it was. Okay.
He would throw his boot out and it would smell the boot. And I said it was, you knocked it out every time. But yeah, I mean, animal stories, I've got them.
Yeah.
I've got them.
Yeah, I guess so. Well, Grandpa was fond of them all, huh? So.
Oh, and my kids, as long as they were novelties, they took care of them. But the novelty wore off, and you know who had to feed them and do all of that.
Well, that sounds about right. I have a 2-year-old dog, so yeah, I get it. So, you move in, you're getting settled, kind of putting things together. What was your first kind of, when you start working with the tribe, what are you doing at first?
Well, at first, I didn't have anything that I did, but it was decided that the spiritual and the and teaching, reading, and things like that would be in the hands of our co-worker Jim.
Mm-hmm.
And Grandpa was given the socioeconomic part.
Mm.
In other words, he was the one to be with the Ayore every day, teach them things that they could do to earn, because they knew nothing about earning anything. That had never been in their culture at all. They swap, but they don't earn. And so he had to teach them about money. So he had a little store, and his job was to keep them learning skills, paying them. First, he would just write it. Mm-hmm. And tell them, now you have this much. And then he introduced money, and he started giving them money. So his was a very important part. Jim's was really important too. But us women were pretty busy with just living in the beginning. Mm. There were no stores. We had, every day I made bread, every single day, you know, and you had to figure out your food because you couldn't use it all up. Mm-hmm. And then we bartered for food with the Ioreos. Like if they went hunting, you could buy meat from them, or you could they would cut down a palm tree and we could buy palm heart. Mm-hmm. And that's delicious, fresh palm, not processed, but mm-hmm. fresh palm heart. And so our diet changed radically at mm-hmm. that time. And so I just remember food was my main preoccupation, and caring for my babies. Mm-hmm. But then Jean Dye Johnson, mm-hmm. whose husband, she wasn't Johnson yet, she hadn't married him, but Jean Dye, her husband had been killed by the Ayore, mm-hmm. and she had a little preliminary primer or grammar that she had written, remember, before the contact was made. Mm-hmm. And she was making her first pedagogical grammar, and that means a self-teaching grammar. Mm-hmm. So it had exercises and things like that built into it. It wasn't just theory. Mm-hmm. And so Helen and Jim and I were her guinea pigs. She wrote each lesson to teach to us. And then we had homework that we had to do. And we did that right from the start with Jean. Jean was one of the single ladies there. And so Joyce was the other single lady, and she would type all of these lessons up for the three of us. We all had our copies, and it was really marvelous that we had this lady, that the only one in the whole wide world that knew anything about their language. Mm-hmm. We had her to teach us, and she still was learning. But what she knew, she was putting in these pedagogical grammars. Meanwhile, your grandpa, who picks up language like that, he was talking, he was, most of his whole day long, he was with them, and he was picking it up. And they used to say to him, "When will your wife talk like you?"
Oh, I bet that was not frustrating at all.
And he couldn't have told you anything about the grammar at all. That wasn't his concern. But yes, he was talking. And he used to go down in the morning. The Ayore men met every morning. And they would sit around, plant their lances beside them, and some of them would put on their headdresses, and they would plan their day, and they'd smoke their pipe. And Grandpa started going down right early on in the whole thing. Although Jim had the main of development of a church and all of these type of bigger things, but Grandpa just went and joined them down in their men's meetings. Mm-hmm. And he'd get up the best he could, and he was telling about God and everything. He was just a natural born. And I think what was to his advantage, he had been in Korea during World War II. Mm-hmm. And he was a supply manager there, and he had to talk to the men, the Korean men that helped him get supplies for the soldiers. And so this wasn't his first round. Mm-hmm. He had done this before. So, yeah. And my job was learning at that point in my job. Other than my care of my family, my food, keeping our clothes washed, all of those things were my jobs. And it was a whole different thing than I'd ever dreamed it would be.
Yeah. So expectation versus reality, what had you expected?
The glamour of it. Mm. You hear about it from a distance. And I thought after I was there, there's no glamour at all. Bugs hurt. Mm-hmm. Mosquitoes are pain. The cockroaches, the spiders, all of these things, there's no glamour to them. Mm-hmm. And I know Howard still ran supplies. And so I would spend time alone with my little children. And I can remember when he was gone, hearing the Ayore in the middle of the night running up the hill. And I thought, oh no, they're going to kill us now. Mm. And Howard's gone. And I was so scared. My heart was pumping out of my chest. Well, what had happened is they had killed a tapir, and they wanted knives. And they thought, well, the missionaries would have knives to help skin and everything. Gotcha. And so they were just up there to beg knives from the missionary man that was there. And none of the other missionaries were scared at all. Mm. But no one thought that I was in my little house down there I was very frightened, very, very frightened. Yeah.
Well, I'm sure it had to be kind of hard to like set the fear aside when you're coming after hearing about people being killed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It hadn't been that many years since they'd killed our 5 men.
Yeah. Well, and then this one man, was it the man by the river? Was it the same group?
It was a different tribe.
That was a different tribe. Okay.
Different tribe, but he had just been killed. Yeah. So we knew these things happened, and yeah. And even there, like on full moon nights, they would sing most of the night long. Well, it's their singing is one person at a time, and it's eerie. When you first hear it, it's very eerie. And they do it with a gourd, and they rattle the gourd, and then they sing till they're out of breath. So you hear this big at the end of every so many phrases, and I can remember the mood that would put me in just all night long to hear that music. I remember that was very difficult for me. And nothing was difficult for Grandpa. Absolutely zero. And he was not the kind of man that, oh, dear Maxine, don't be. No, you're fine. You know, that kind of, what's your big deal, Maxine? And I felt lonely. I wanted to get up and go into my mother's bedroom and crawl in bed with her. Is what I wanted to do with bad dreams. And Grandpa was not that kind of a coddly. He wanted to toughen me up. What was it he used to say? Get the victory over that, Maxine. Huh?
And did at what point, or did you ever feel not afraid?
After a while, I wasn't nearly like the music didn't affect me. After a while, you know, you adjust to a place. You know, you adjust to the differences. What would still get to me and make me fear is if they got mad at us and bawled us out, then I wouldn't know what they were saying, and I you know, like they could. Their bark was worse than their bite, really, a lot of the time. But after you get language too, and after you understand more, that takes a lot of your fear away. And I'm kind of like a parrot too. Once I got over my fear, I was picking up language, and they used to laugh about me. The ladies, they just loved to watch everything we did in our houses, and they'd come and look through the window, and they would talk to each other and comment on everything I was doing. And if I heard something I hadn't heard before, I'd open a drawer and pull out my notebook. And then they would laugh and says, now she's going to write it. Now she's going to write it.
I bet that you felt a little bit like a sideshow, huh?
Yeah. When we would sit at our table to eat, that was new too. People sitting at tables. And I would make Kool-Aid. And so when we'd start to drink our red Kool-Aid, it says, they're going to drink the blood now. They're going to drink the blood now. But every meal, we just had them up there. And this missionary was visiting us. And he said to Howard, "Don't you ever get tired of them looking in your window?" And he says, "Why, no. If they weren't there, I'd go outdoors and say, 'We're going to eat now.'" Call them up.
But they were,
And
you think about it, like they were learning a lot about you too. They just didn't
yes,
have the same etiquette that we do about it,
no, they don't sneak around, sneak up on you. They're there.
Yeah. Wow.
And Grandpa would go out at night, and the women loved to come up and teach him about what they called the stars. And he would sit on the ground with them, and they would tell him what that star was and what that star was. And yeah, that first term with them, we were there. We'd been almost 2 years in San Jose, and then 4 years right with the Ayore before we took a furlough. And things, as I got more fluent in the language, and then I learned that certain ones of the girls would come up and knead my bread. I would put all the ingredients together, and Dapaway would, she'd love to come up and knead my bread, and I could give her some of it. And others would come up and sprinkle my mud floor, and then that helped to keep your house cool. Every morning I would sprinkle lots of water on our mud floor, leave the bedroom and go into our other kitchen, and that meanwhile that and the thatched roof, that would keep your house cool during the day. It helped to keep the house cool. Yeah, those first, maybe that first year, I had a lot to learn. And then in those days, they were just stopping burying people alive. Like if a person thought they were going to die, they were that near death, they would say, "Bury me." And their loved ones would dig for them and bury them while they still had breath. And that's what they preferred. They didn't want to die outside the ground. And we learned later the reason for that was that if their spirits were buried with them alive, you still had the spirit. And then you would be a benevolent spirit after your death. But if you died above ground, you were a dangerous spirit.
Okay.
And the dangerous spirit could do harm to the people. And so that was why they buried alive. But I never saw that happen. But it had just stopped prior to our coming. And so the deal was, if they died, we had to bury them. They wouldn't touch the dead body. So Grandpa would take the wheelbarrow and put the dead body in the wheelbarrow. He was the undertaker too.
Wow. That had to be really hard.
That was very hard. And then they would bury things with them. Certain things had to be buried with them. And their burial was a very big deal. And they would put things on top of the grave. And they would never revisit it. He had to be careful where he buried, because it couldn't be near a path or anything where they frequented.
Okay.
And I used to feel sorry for him.
Yeah, that would be a really, really difficult job.
Yeah. And then the little babies, they did bury. We had a lot of little babies being buried at birth. And I asked one of the ladies one time, "Don't you feel bad when you've put that baby down there?" And she said, "Sometimes we do, But she said we'd feel worse to let it live and then have the people taunt it. So, like, say it was born with no hair, they would always bury it.
Oh, wow.
Because that was an abnormality. And so if they would have let it live, then the people would have poked fun at it forever. So I got to going down when they had their babies, and they liked that. I would take their baby home and wash it really nice and wrap it in a little receiving blanket or something and take it back all nice and clean, and they liked that. And they were also their babies from what they did when they cut the cord, they would rub dirt in it.
Oh.
That's how they clotted it, the blood. And so they had babies die of tetanus.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of babies never made it because they died of tetanus. But none of the babies that I delivered ever died. And so they wanted me to come for their births. But the old ladies didn't like me because when the old ladies delivered the babies, then the family is obligated to give them something.
Mm.
So they were out of work. and they had an honored position. That child called them the one who washed me.
Mm.
And so that was a problem too for them. But some of the little tiny ones would call me the one who washed me. And I had one lady, and she had been all day long. I'd gone home, fixed lunch, gone back, and it was nighttime. And Howard came down and he said, "Hasn't she had that baby yet?" And I said, "No." And he said, "Let's walk her. Maybe that'll help." So he helped get her up, and we went outdoors. And we no sooner started walking than the baby started coming. And I looked under the blanket. We'd put a blanket around her. We were afraid she'd go into chills. And I looked under the blanket, and the bag of waters hadn't ruptured.
Oh, wow.
So I said to Howard, "It looks like a frozen turkey." and he said, "Oh, Maxine, that's the bag of waters. Right away, let those waters out. But don't let her know anything about this because it would be an abnormal birth." And so I pierced the bag and the water came out, and he said, "Get it off its face." And I got it off its face, and it breathed in. But he said, otherwise it'll drown in the water. Wow. And so he was telling me what to do I had to do it all under the blanket. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I had interesting things happen with the births. Yeah.
So how do you, when you're a missionary and you see these things happening and you know in your heart that this isn't right, how do you deal with that? How do you move forward? And, because obviously if you went charging in and said, no, you can't do this anymore, then they would reject you. How do you balance that?
One of our training, when we're trained to be missionaries, you never take from a culture what you cannot immediately supply in a different way with their blessing. Otherwise, if you tell them that's a bad thing to do, they'll just hide it from you. Mm. And so you have accomplished nothing. They'll go on doing it anyway. And sometimes more because they're kind of rebelling against you, like a child with a parent. So no, we never did that. We never did that. We pled for the babies. Like I had twins born, and twins are always buried alive. And so I told them mother had professed faith, and I said, "I'll come. I'll bring bottles." But the baby before the twins was still nursing. And she said, but we love this child, and this child needs my milk, and I can't nurse two more. And I said, well, I will supply all the milk. And I had no sooner gone up the hill than the old ladies came in and buried the twins. And that, I couldn't say anything because that was their custom. But what we did to kind of help them to see that a baby has worth is we started our little orphanage. And if they didn't want the baby, we would take it. We'll take it. And so we, or what they used to do also with their children, say the father dies and the mother has a little toddler, then she can't get another husband as long as that little toddler's there with her. So they neglect the toddler, hoping it will die.
Wow.
And the little toddler will eat dirt and other things because they won't feed it. So we had also in the orphanage, we would take these children too. And then Howard hired people from the Chiquitano village that were very civilized, and they came out and they would take care of the orphans for us. And he started a school for the orphans so he could educate them.
And did anybody ever want their children back or no?
No.
Okay.
Once they give them up, they know.
Whew. That would be tough.
Yeah, that. But one of the Ayore ladies, after we started keeping them, the ones that we could, she would come running up and she'd say, so-and-so's about to bury its baby. And she would tattle on them.
Oh, good.
So we could go down and take the baby. They didn't like her doing that at all. But she was tattling. Yeah.
And so when the children in the orphanage, once they're raised, do they still live with the tribe, or what do they do?
Yeah, when they're self, they're able, they went back to the tribe.
Wow.
But they didn't need care.
They were just welcomed back.
Back after that. Okay. Welcome back, yeah. This is way fast forwarding. When we went down with the New Testament, we went to every major camp of the Ayoreos. We flew into their camps with 25 New Testaments. And we'd flown into the Latvian Baptist camp of Ayoreos. And it was quite a distance where the airstrip was and where the village was. And we were walking down the path to get to the village after we had landed. And the Ayore lady came running up to Grandpa, threw her arms around him, and started weeping. And it was one of the orphans.
Oh, how wonderful.
She was now a woman, but she saw Grandpa, and she just like I'm seeing my father.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, Grandma.
And her name was Adoy.
That's amazing. Yeah. Well, I'm really glad that God put you guys there and that you were able to do that.
And there's no more of that, Becky. That's the beautiful thing. Absolutely no more of that. We even have twins in Paraguay, and they're proud of their little twins.
Wow.
And absolutely zero burying of babies.
Mm.
They're not burying their loved ones who require to die above ground. I mean, below ground. And it's a whole new thing that if you would have told me in those early days that one day this day was coming,
Mm.
like they were forever leaving to go to war while we were with them, and they were still going off to fight, because they go in small groups, and they would go to the salt beds and fight. And now they all get together for Bible conferences
Isn't that beautiful? Wow.
and then have preach-offs. Yeah,
Wow.
it is. It is wonderful. It
Wow.
is. We never dreamed. I would never, in my wildest dream, I can remember when we were trying to plant a little church, and I thought, this is never going to happen. And I can remember the Lord telling me, I will build my church, and the gates of hell will not prevail against it.
Mm.
And I thought, oh, wonderful. I forgot that, Lord. I forgot that.
Yeah.
And here the once they had such a large conference, and all of them from Bolivia went up for this one in Paraguay, and there were 700 gathered
Wow.
in that conference
Mm.
that used to go to war against each other. Just it's marvelous. It really is.
It is. What a legacy, huh? That you got to
Yeah,
be part of that. That's pretty amazing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's a thrill to have given them the New Testament,
Yeah.
and later the Old 17 books of the Old Testament, and now that's all been my work has been revised, and all of the Old Testament stuff that were in individual books it's all in one volume now.
Wow.
They have a Bible.
That's awesome.
And the few books of the Old Testament that aren't translated, they're training Ayore men to do that translation
Wow.
on their own.
That's all. That's amazing. That's really
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
Mm.
So it's a wonderful thing to see God at work.
It really is. Especially when you get to see when we're in that moment, like you said, when you first got there, God's going to do something.
You're hoping
You're
all the
hoping,
way
right?
through. Yeah, you're hoping all the way through.
But when you get to look back, and see and go, oh, wow.
It's, yeah.
Yeah. Because I'm sure it felt very slow, the progress.
Oh, I used to tell Grandpa, why, I don't think anything's going to happen. I think we need to leave now.
Mm.
They've had the gospel. A few have believed, and I just don't see the point. And he say, Maxine, I feel like that man when in the parable of Jesus, where the tree wasn't producing fruit, and the owner was going to cut it down, and his servant said, "No, I'll dig around it, and I will manure it, and I will work with it. Give it another year." And he says, "I feel like that man, Maxine."
Mm.
And he just, thankfully, he did never, on my weak moments, he didn't say, "Me too," and get out of there. Yeah. And another thing he used to tell me was, because I would come up with brainy ideas, if we do this, or if we do that. And he'd say, "Maxine, I don't think it has to do with what we do or how we do it. I think what it has to do with is that we're here."
Mm.
the fact that we're present.
Hallelujah, I have found you, whom my soul so long has craved. Jesus satisfies my longing, through his blood I now am saved.
If you want more information about our time in Bolivia, go to ayore.org. That is spelled AYORE.org.